For many years now, Russ and Craig have had many wide-ranging conversations with folks from all over the gaming world. This is one of those conversations.
D6G, the Lost Chapter.
Hey, so here we are in a big, dark, empty Dunkin' Donuts.
Why is nobody here?
I don't know, man. It's like we're at that galactic central core Dunkin' Donuts where everybody locks into, and nobody's here.
Weird. Well,
it is weird. You know what? It must have something to do with the confluence of events coming up towards episode 2000. 2000, oh my God.
2000, dear God.
Would be dead.
Let me die by then.
Literally, actually be dead.
Yes, I think so.
So many of those third chairs are planning and prepping for episode 200.
Yes.
That we're all alone in the intergalactic Dunkin' Donuts.
We are all alone. So, here's the thing. For episode 200, we thought about not having an actual third chair on the show because we wanted to pay tribute to all of our third chairs for contributing to the show. Yeah. And so that's what we did. And so since we didn't have a third chair, we didn't have anybody to put in Dunkin' Donuts with us for the time we normally record the Lost Chapter that comes out right before episode 200. So instead, it's just Craig.
We asked Rafe, but he said something about playing guitar, juggling eggs, and dropping 3 of them.
You never can tell what Rafe's up to. It's really
never can
very
tell.
Strange.
It sounded like maybe he's baking pies again.
It did. So we thought instead we would do a Where Are They Now Lost Chapter, which
is fitting.
Which is fitting. So these are Lost Chapters. We will go back and look at games we reviewed quite some time ago and kind of, talk about how we feel of the game now, literally years later from when we reviewed it. And are we still playing it? What do we think about it? Do we see it in rotation? And so when the last time we did a Where Are They Now, we got through up to and including episode 126.
Yes.
So we thought we'd pick up where we left off. And
going to 127,
but there were no.
We didn't review a game.
No,
we talked about the state of miniatures games.
Yes.
At that time, which was June of 2013.
Yeah, 2013.
And a lot's changed since then.
Yep. But now let's go ahead to episode 128. Yep. And in episode 128, we did in fact review a game. We reviewed. Jeff Finkelstein was in the third chair, and we reviewed Sentinels of the Multiverse, which is a card game a co-op card game in which a bunch of players take on the roles of non-IP infringing superheroes and do battle against in this case, the card game, which is powered by some AI around a supervillain and his minions, and you're fighting in various crazy environments. And what makes the game really cool is the fact that all the card mechanics allow for crazy things to happen and a lot of replayability because the villains and their minions come up and reveal their powers in random orders, but also there's different environments you fight in. So you might fight in a city one time, you might fight in a swamp or undersea next time, you might fight on Mars another time, and what the environment does to you makes the battle different. And then, of course, there are many, many different heroes to choose from, so which heroes each player is playing is also changes your opportunity or tactics. Great artwork, great color, and despite the fact it's their own IP, you feel like these are real heroes. Craig, what are your feelings on the Sentinels? When was the last time you played it? Have you seen it in a while?
I see it all the time at your brother's house.
Yes.
Because your brother loves that game and bought into it hardcore. Mm-hmm. I don't get to play it because generally we end up playing shorter games, but I know that it is getting played, and of course now it's got the miniatures to it and everything, and so it's really grown in leaps and bounds, and I know locally it's still played, not by me.
It's played quite a bit. We don't play it often in my house as much as we used to, but my girls do love it. We did play it quite a bit. We've played it on vacation. I introduced it to my brother on vacation. That's how he got addicted to it. His family always played the heck out of it. There's now an iPad app, so if you want to play it on the go, the iPad app is fantastic. There was just an iPad companion app for it that you would use during the game, but now there's a fully functioning version of Sentinels of the Multiverse on the iPad, which I play with my daughters quite a bit when we're traveling. So just still a great game. I love the IP. I love the art. I always, whenever I see a new expansion for it, I always snap it up to add to my collection just because I like to read the art, and that, of course, gets me back into the game. So it's a great game, and it still has one of my favorite co-op situations because for some reason in this game, you don't micromanage everyone else. You let everybody do their own thing, and it feels like a true co-op. You don't have those moments where one player runs the table, which is kind of nice. So Sentinels of Multiverse, still a great game. I would still highly recommend it to anyone who likes superheroes and co-ops, for sure. So what did we talk about in episode 129, Craig? Do you remember?
Well, 129, we did an interview with Terra Nova about Rivet Wars.
Yes.
And we reviewed BioShock Infinite.
Yeah.
The board game.
Yes. So the Ted Terra Nova's interview was fantastic. Rivet Wars, whole different story, but that's not what we reviewed in this episode. We did review Rivet Wars later. But BioShock, interesting board game. So I was a huge fan of
that. Didn't mean that Rivet Wars was bad. Rivet Wars is very good. The way Russ said that sounded maybe that Ted Terra Nova was great. Rivet Wars was another story.
No.
That's not what he meant. He meant that Rivet Wars is a story for another time.
That's right.
Great game, but now we're talking about BioShock.
We reviewed Rivet Wars later. What I was trying to suggest was that I still play Rivet Wars. I do not play BioShock Infinite.
Yes.
And the reason is that I like the concept of BioShock Infinite. I bought it as soon as it came out. I loved the video game. However, I don't know. There was something about the game that just didn't take off for us, and I can't really put my finger on it. I guess it just felt a little Me Too. I don't know why. There were elements to it that were cool. I liked the theme of it, but it just didn't work for us. And there were other area control games that we like more. And so, unfortunately, it just didn't make it into the rotation. I still have it. It's still on my gaming shelf, but I haven't really played it in a long time. I should probably give it away, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my favorite mechanic, though. The whole board control, and then it's not really an IP that I have any interest in at all or knowledge about. In fact, in an effort to get a hold of the whole BioShock mythos, I read probably one of the worst books I've ever read. And so that might have colored me as well. Yes. But I don't think I've played it since we reviewed it. Right. And it wasn't going to be in my rotation, so I won't say that's a fault of the game. It's just not my kind of. It wasn't my kind of game from the get-go. So
right. So in episode 130, we didn't review any games. But in episode 131, what did we review, Craig?
We did not review any games either.
What about 132?
David Weber was 131.
Yay, well, that's awesome.
Okay, 132. 132 would place us in September of 2013.
That's Gen Con. So
and
we did play
that was Gen Con, so no review there.
So what about 133? 133.
Firefly.
Oh, this is interesting. So 133, we reviewed Firefly, the board game.
Yeah.
Now, Craig, this is interesting. So Firefly, the board game, this is the game, Gale Force 9's first big foray into board games.
Yeah, it was a big surprise.
Actually, I guess Spartacus was really the first one, wasn't it? But
right,
Firefly's right after it. Firefly, big surprise, fantastic models, great imitation
great
as
gameplay.
Part of the show. The only challenge to Firefly, and I think the reason it doesn't make it to my table more often, is the games, and it just takes too long to play.
It's a long game and a table eater.
It uses a lot of table, but that doesn't really bother me. I like games where you have to sort of own the space and it's an event and the whole. That doesn't bother me. But what bothers me about it is, and I want to love it, but the missions, and I wish they would release new missions that were short and forced an end. And instead what happens is the missions are all triggered based on someone getting something done. And if all the players just fly around upgrading their ship and getting better crew and never really pushing against the mission, the game can literally never end. Right. And so that's a flaw, and I think it's a big flaw in some of these kinds of games, which is unfortunate because the game is beautiful. Now, that said, I've seen it come to the table in our gaming group as recently as last week. So it does still come out. There are still some passionate players for it. It does get, it's in the rotation. It comes out maybe once a month, maybe once every other month. However, I just really wish there was a mechanic that could make the game play, keep it inside 3 hours. This game's way out saying it's welcome after the 4 to 5 hour mark. It needs to have been over so you can play again or do something else.
My memory isn't that it isn't quite that long, that it lasted quite as long as you seem to be indicating. But when you factor in setup time and gameplay time and everything, I will say that I own it still. I have a couple of the expansions. I am a little alarmed at the number of expansions. I always feel like I'm not getting the most out of my game when the company is churning out expansions, and eventually I can't keep up. I will say that every time we get together, Firefly gets mentioned, and I carry Firefly with me whenever we go whenever I go to John's house or Joe's house. It always ends up not getting played because of the time factor, and we always end up going for something shorter. But the theme is great. I love the game. I love the mechanics of the game. There is that lack of a mechanism to make you kind of go for it, so you can pull that sort of flying around the verse, not going for the throat, if you will. But I love it, and I hope to play it again soon. It certainly hasn't fallen out of my heart anyway.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I'd say it's still also the best Firefly game out there. There are some card games and other things that are fun, but this is the best overall experience. If you want to sit down and spend a Saturday afternoon in the verse, it's still the best way to go. Now, this next game we reviewed in episode 134, which was in October of 2013, was Level 7 Omega Protocol.
Yep.
Now, this game I have played the heck out of.
And to this day.
To this day. So what happened was I played the heck out of it. We finished the first we got through a large chunk of the first campaign, took a break, brought it back out, got through the first campaign all the way to like the 6th or 7th mission, and I crushed them and they died. And they tried it 3 times and couldn't get through it. But when the expansion recently came out, which adds another whole story and another whole set of missions now taking place in Russia, you go ahead and try the game again. There's a couple new characters. There's a giant walking mech. There's some new aliens, all kinds of other things. There's, of course, Russians running around. And it just revitalized the game in my gaming group. It's one of the few games that I've literally painted every miniature inside of it. And it just gets the hours played in this. My board game geek logging shows this is one of my top played games. So I still love this game. The reason my group still likes it is I have a gaming group that really likes the campaign feeling of a game, and they really like the sort of the descent model, the overlord versus the players mode. And I love it too. And I love being the overlord, and they love being the players. And so we look for games like this. And I would say, while Level 7 doesn't have the best components on the planet, though that still goes to Fantasy Flight, it does have, I think, the idea of the adrenaline mechanic, where the more the players do, the more adrenaline they give to the overseer, and that powers how much the overseer can do. That is such a great mechanic, because it really, the more players there are, the more stuff the overseer gets, and it just scales the game right up. The players try to do very little. The overseer is starved for adrenaline, and it really is a very clever mechanic that also fits right into the fluff. So,
well, it captures wonderfully that whole concept of trying to sneak.
Yes.
Now, you don't want to go too fast. You don't want to make too much noise. You want to kind of take it slow and steady. But then, as you need to accomplish more, you start to have to weigh the threat versus the reward. It's a great mechanic.
Another favorite mechanic in Level 7 is their campaign mechanic, in which the number of turns it took you to complete a level carries over to the next turn. And this creates a really bit of tension. So even as the Overlord, because what's interesting about the campaign is if the Overlord wins one level, he wins the game. So you definitely, the intent of the players, you definitely, even as the Overlord, you're hoping the player gets through a first few levels, right? Because you want the campaign to have some meat on its bones. So they're going to get through those first few levels, no problem. But what you're hoping as an Overlord, it takes them more time than they expect, and that you slow them down and cause them trouble, so they're having less and less time in future levels until the bad guys get more powerful, because basically there's this mode that kicks in that makes the bad guys stronger and allows you to permanently kill the heroes. And so you're hoping for this to happen, and the heroes are trying to time. It's not like Descent where you clear the level and you run around and grab all the treasure and kind of take your time, heal all the way up, and then exit. In this game, you don't grab all the treasure. You don't heal all the way up. Wounds carry over, but time is your most precious resource. And so it's a really interesting mechanic and really creates that pressure on the players. And they don't know what's next, and they don't know if they're going to need more time next level. And I really like that element to the game.
Yeah.
So
great game.
Great game. Can't speak highly enough of that one.
And still darkening the door on a regular basis.
Yes. Episode 135. This is now November 2013.
Yeah.
We reviewed an Engelstein special. Rafe was back in the third
one of the big ones.
Space Cadets Dice Duel.
Yeah.
This was a really cool game. I remember when Jeff first showed it to us, And we really realized, I think Craig and I realized together that the Engelsteins had actually replaced their earlier game, Space Cadets, with a better game.
They Jones theoried their own game.
Which is unfortunate because Space Cadets itself is a really cool game, but Dice Duel captures the tension and feeling of you're in the middle of combat so well to the point where it doesn't make it to the table. It's in my rotation, and when there's a party going on, and Craig and I pull this out almost routinely at Adepticon every year because it's such a huge hit every single time without fail. It is a fantastic party game where you want lots of shouting and good engagement.
You need 8 people for it to really shine. That's one of its one of the things that limits its
and spectators make it better because watching the captains pace back and forth and give their orders is always a fun ride. Now the problem with it is it is very tense. Like you'll see people literally after a game, they want to play a second one, but they don't. They need a break. You need to actually chill out because it's an extremely tense game, but it's a very unique experience to get your adrenaline going. This one should be in everyone's collection, and it should come to the table, I would say, every month or so because it is just, or at any gaming party you have, because it really gets people engaged, and there's still nothing else like it right
No, and I'll tell you, speaking to the validity of the adrenaline rush that you get in this game, I, in my head, am constantly conflating memories of Space Cadets Dice Duel with memories of Artemis, the fully realized computer bridge simulator that they run at conventions, Gen Con originally. Now they do it at Adepticon. They do it other places where each player has a computer screen and it's real time and you've got to do all this stuff. And I think the conflation may occur because one of my favorite memories of Artemis is Jeff Engelstein launching the final nuke in a very calm launch a nuke. Boom, end of game. Right. But it gives you that same, oh my God, so much is going on, I have to focus on my own thing, adrenaline that, as Russ said, you need a recovery period before you can play it again. But a blast at parties, a blast at big conventions, and a lot of fun. People just enjoy watching it as you just wildly throw dice around trying to get what you need done.
Yeah, great game. So now that brings us to episode 136, also November 2013. And in this episode, we reviewed Dungeon Roll. Yeah. Now, this game's still in my collection. It's a great portable game, and I love that it comes in a little, treasure chest. Craig, are you still playing Dungeon Roll? You were a big fan when it first came.
I was a huge fan, and I got the little mouse pad and everything. It doesn't make it to the table, and I'll tell you why. It is no fault at all of Dungeon Roll. The niche that Dungeon Roll fits, this small, portable, quick game, is something that game designers have been aggressively seeking for the last 3 years. And if I had to go back and catalog the games that we have been sent to play test or to people who just wanted our opinion, the games that fit into this spot in your collection far outnumber any other kind of game. And so I would say they're not superior to Dungeon Roll, but when I've wanted to play Dungeon Roll or a game similar to that, where you're just playing these quick die rolling games or card games, there's a bunch of different mechanics now where a lot of it is dungeon delving, but I mean, to a lesser extent, the Tiny Epic games sort of almost fit into the same category.
Tiny Epic Kingdoms, there are so many and Boss Monster, there are so many interesting games that are very compelling and even have similar themes like Boss Monster, but have a little more meat on their bones. And honestly, my daughters first loved Dungeon Roll, but it starts to outstay it. It can go a little long sometimes.
Yeah.
And it needs to be a little shorter. And I do think the Tiny Epic games sort of replace this, but you're right. I think you nailed it, Craig. There are so many games competing for this space right now. It's not even that Dungeon Roll is bad. It's just there's a new hotness, small portable game. It seems like once every other month.
No, every time I go to fill that niche and I've got a little bit of time and some friends around, I go to Dungeon Roll. But there's this game that I wanted to try that I haven't tried, and it kind of just gets superseded. But I have it, and I enjoy it, and it's quick and it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. So that's Dungeon Roll. Here's an interesting one. So in episode 137, now we're into December 2013. This is when Malifaux 2nd Edition hits the streets.
Now that is interesting.
This is an interesting topic. So Luke Ritalik was on the show then, big miniature gamer down under, and helped us review Malifaux 2nd Edition. Craig, what are your thoughts on Malifaux Second Edition hitting the streets now?
I liked Malifaux First Edition, and I had a crew right off the bat, and I did find it a little brain burny. The cards were a little brain burny to me. They weren't a deal breaker like they were with some of our friends, but I enjoyed it. The aesthetic wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but it was extremely well executed. So I kind of grabbed the Outcasts. They were sort of a more normal looking crew. And I enjoyed playing in the universe. I enjoyed playing the game. There were things that I didn't really like about it, and 2E really did address those, and I think it did make the game better, tightened it up, made it stronger. But at the same time, my miniatures, the demands on my miniatures focus had risen astronomically at this time, and there were so many things going on that I didn't play it. And then when I did play it, I was like, yeah, I don't really like, the models are beautiful, but it's not really my kind of genre, is I think what happened. And so with 2E, through no fault of the second edition of the game, which I played several games before I kind of faded with it, it really, my realization that Malifaux wasn't going to be a game for me came at the same time as 2E, but like I said, through no fault of the rules, which I thought were much tighter.
Exactly. Now, we should say, though, that Malifaux is probably one of the strongest played games in our area.
Locally, yep.
Locally. We're a very passionate group. I would see that in War Machine. Now, Craig and I are on any of these two groups.
Right.
But
I would say the Malifaux group is much, well, actually, they're different nights. So you're right, yeah. They're both equally strong.
But they are passionate groups, passionate folks, out there doing the thing with Malifaux, and it's all, and oftentimes even our gaming venue, there's a Malifaux game or two going on. So it's very much loved by our gaming group. It's just not, and I love the models, but it's the rule set. I've just found that I'm much more of a dice rolling, not a card flipping kind of guy. So over time, the innovation of the card flipping, I felt slowed the game down too much, even with the 2E rules. But there are people who still love that. It's just not my cup of tea. So the game, obviously, it hit what it was trying to do. Obviously, it's doing very, very well. I know they've iterated on it a bit since then as well. But Malifaux is still a fantastic game. I would say it is not an introductory game for miniatures, though. The miniatures are still really beautiful, but also a little tricky to put together. Yeah. But they also, and the rules, I would say, are a little more advanced than some other miniature games to get into. Yep. But that said,
there's a reason we're not called the 52 card deck generation.
But that all being said, it is a fantastic game, and it's a great game to move up to. If your current miniature game, you wish it had a few more options and a little more detail at a skirmish level, definitely check out Malifaux. And it's such an eclectic selection of models.
You're going to find a faction
something
that you like.
You really are.
Yep.
You really are. Let's see. Speaking of miniature games, in episode 138, also in December, we jumped back into Firestorm Armada 2nd Edition.
Oh, that was when we had Chris Weave on.
We did, and we're gonna talk about Chris and our other third chairs, a week from now or so. But this was really a fantastic review of this game, and I really like what they did with Firestorm Armada 2nd Edition. Yep. And Craig and I played it a bit. We played it not too long ago at Adepticon
with Bob.
Yeah, with Bob. However, and I don't know why, Craig, why don't we play this game more? Because it's really good.
It is really good. It's a long game.
Yeah, it is a long game.
And I think it's a little longer, like model for model. The minutes per model, if you will, is very high.
Yep.
So you're going to have like 12 or 14 models on the table, and your game's going to last about 2 hours.
Yep.
So whereas if you think about your average run of the mill, like let's say, Conflict 47 is our, passion of the moment. My small 1,000-point army has about 40 models in it, 30 to 40 models, and that game's going to last me about an hour. Craig, and in that hour, I'm moving all these different models. They're doing all these different things. So in my opinion, like I love Firestorm Armada. And I love the models, and I love naval battles. But for some reason, the scope and the flow of a naval battle sort of almost demands this time. You know, it's really it uses up a lot of time.
I'm torn because I think Halo Fleet Battles is better starship mechanics, but Firestorm Armada has more factions. So I wish the mechanics were compatible. So I wish that I could take my Halo fleet and fight Firestorm Armada ships, because I would totally do that, because I love my Halo ships and I love and I wish the Halo mechanics. I wish it was almost like Bolt Action and K-47, where they were compatible a little more closely, and I could use the updated rules with my older ships, because I do love the models. But I think you're right, and I think you've invented a new metric, Craig, we need to track, which is minutes per model, MPM.
I think MPM.
We should talk about that in terms of miniature games. Well, it's a 5 MPM game, so if you're gonna have 10 models.
5 MPM would be a very short game.
Well, that's good, right? But unless it's Malifaux, Malifaux is definitely a high miniature per model game.
Oh, Malifaux is crazy high, because every model is like an army unto itself.
But it's also a 5-man army, so it's designed that way. It's meant to be 5 MPM.
Yep.
So this is
I mean, I would say, and I think, I mean, I haven't played Halo as much as you have. But my memory is that it's a much faster game.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I think because what you have is you've got those smaller ships, you've got the frigates and whatnot, but they're more of a supportive role, and they're built into the stats of the larger ships.
Right.
And so it's almost like war gear. Yep. And so you've got that sense of a big fleet, but you're moving fewer units. The units are working together rather than independently firing and independently targeting, which is, in my opinion, where kind of those games sort of start to fall down, if you can't just fire at a unit and sort of like, and which I think Firestorm Armada went to, but there's just so much. I love the game. I've got the models. I've got the rules. I just it just can't quite squeeze itself into the rotation right now.
And I'm not really sure what the problem is, because I do like it.
Right.
Well, people challenge us though, like our Patreons, like Bob, when they'll say, "Hey, you're coming to Adepticon. Can you play me some Firestorm?" We'll be like, "Sure, we'll bring our fleets." So I do like it. And if someone's like, "Hey, let's play," if you were like, "Hey, Russ, can we play next week?" I'd be like, "Sure, I'll bring my stuff."
Right? Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But it doesn't, for some reason, it doesn't come to the top of my list. I'm always distracted by something else. Maybe it's just I've got too many miniature games. I don't know. So episode 139 was a predictions episode. So no games reviewed. We'll skip that and go right to episode 140. Here's a fun one. We reviewed 2 games that are small but fun: King of Tokyo and Rampage.
Yes.
And it was sort of like a cage match sort of review, where we tried to describe which one we liked more. So, Craig, are you playing either King of Tokyo still or Rampage still?
Well, I will say, sorry, I'm trying to. It's Terror in Meeple City now. That's what it is.
They renamed it.
It's they had to rename it. They had a little IP infringement issue. King of Tokyo has never been a game of my choice.
No, my kids actively don't like King of Tokyo.
I actively do not like King of Tokyo.
And my girls do not like it, so we don't ever play King of Tokyo.
Yeah, and I will tell you that Rampage has very recently hit the table, and no pun intended. I play a slightly more streamlined version with Reese, and recently I played with Reese and Joe and Joe's son, who is 1 year older than Reese, so 7, Connor. They loved it. They had a blast. I still think it's a great game. I love those little meeples. The kids love the concept of destroying the city. And now I still think Rampage is a great game. I'm glad I have it. I'm glad I have the option to play it when Reese wants to play it, or when we're getting together as a group, because it's always fun. The only issue is it's a 4-player game, so 1 or 2 extra people show up to the table and you're ending up playing something else, and that's happened quite a few times when it's grown-ups. It made it to the table most recently at the end of the summer, or actually at the very beginning of the school year, mainly because it was grown-ups and kids all together at the same time, so there was multiple things going on. But I like it a lot. And I will say that King of New York is a fun game. I enjoy King of New York. It kicks it up a notch. It makes it more interesting. And I think it's a far superior game, in my opinion, to King of Tokyo.
Yeah, exactly. I love Rampage also, and it does still hit the table. I've seen players play it quite a bit. It's a great one in your collection. It's just one of those wacky component games. I think we talked about it on the components that make game multi-mechanics, right? It's one of those games.
Yep.
definitely should check it out. A really, really fun one. And Mike and I actually I know a lot of friends who love King of Tokyo, and King of New York also supposed to be very, very good. But I was so burnt on King of Tokyo, I didn't even try King of New York. So those don't appeal to me. But again, that's a personal preference because we know a lot of folks that really like that one as well.
We do.
But and both these games I see played all the time. But if I were to choose, I would still pick Rampage over King of Tokyo for sure.
Or Terra and Meeple City.
Yeah. Here's one for you, Craig. I know this is going to make you shed a little tear. So
it does.
Steel your soul, my friend.
I am.
In February 2014.
Oh, that was so long ago.
We reviewed Sails of Glory.
Oh, tell me it isn't so.
This game has so much potential, Craig. Why don't you play it all the time?
I still think it's a great game. Mm-hmm. I cannot imagine that you're going to find an Age of Sail game that is going to deal with as much detail as Sails of Glory did and still kind of keep it a little bit streamlined. The problem is
go ahead.
that it takes a while, and it's not an easy game to just jump back into.
Right.
But it's I have it on my shelf. I take it down from time to time just to look at the ships. And Randy just a couple weeks ago cornered me and demanded that I play with him. We both did the Kickstarter. We both have the mats and everything that goes with it. And so hopefully I will be able to play soon once the play is over, which probably actually means sometime in 2017. Another number that gives you a headache just to think about it.
Oh, yeah.
But I still think it's a fun game. It's a very complex game with all those chits and everything and tracking all the damage. And I think it's almost like a BattleTech level of complexity. And so I look forward to playing it again. I hope it lives up to my memory. And Randy promised that he would relearn the rules so I wouldn't have to read the rule book all over again. But that's mainly the main reason that it hasn't seen the table in a long time for me is that it's not a game that is forgiving of or fits naturally into an eclectic gamer's lifestyle. Yeah. You can't just jump back into it.
It is a great game though, and I was going to bring up the fact that a friend of the show, Randy, there, who's in my level 7 group, and now we're playing Seafall together, is a huge Age of Sail guy. One of the reasons we're enjoying Seafall so much. And yeah, I know he was reaching out to you like, come on, Craig, because he's got everything under the sun for that game too.
Yeah. He went all in. I did not go all in on Sails of Glory. He went all in.
It just doesn't. I think you're right. It's one of those games that look complex, a lot of goodness in there, but it's the kind of game that rewards someone who is more of a mono gamer and willing to commit to it 100%, or at least as a large chunk of their gaming life. And I think we flit around too much to make a game like that work for us. So it's more of I think it's probably more of a style thing than a deficiency in the game, because if you really got passionate about it, I think it could be a fun game that has lots of replayability and would really reward the naval tactician in you.
Oh, exactly. I think it's a great game. And I think that's probably true of many games.
Yeah, I think it is
that are just too complex that you to really. I mean, it's a miniatures game. It's a full-blown miniatures game is what it is, but you're only using 2 or 3 models. Oh, the PMP on that one's going to be hot.
Right. I like this new mechanic. So there you have it. That takes us to episode 141. I think it's a good place to pause, put a pin in it, as it were, and we'll come back and visit again here, maybe not quite as far apart as we did last time, because we got a lot of catching up work to do, Craig.
It has been a while,
We're only in 2014. If we take as long as we did last time, it'll be 2018 before we do these things again. So that's where we are. That's where they are now. And again, thanks everyone, especially our Patreons. Patreon patrons.
Yes. They know what you mean.
Any number of those things. You guys are what makes it possible for us to get to episode 200. I think if we still had to manage all the advertisers the way we used to manage them and do the eBay auctions and all the other things, to get the revenue to keep the lights on, we would have burnt out. And you allow us to focus on the content and getting the third chairs in and getting this stuff done. So thank you so much, guys, for bringing us to this milestone. And we certainly think of it more as the beginning of the next segment of the D6 generation, and certainly not the end. So we look forward to being with you guys for many more years to come. So thank you again for helping keep the show going.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for purchasing a D6G Lost Chapter. Supporting the show helps it grow.